I think it's difficult to figure out what it looks like to love people that don't believe the same things as you. And so churches are having a really hard time figuring out how to talk about people who are gay and lesbian, because in the Bible it talks about how that's not something that believers should approve of.
Are you living good? Is your mind right? Hey, whoa. Are you living good? Is your mind right?
I think the main one is a very divisive one is our LGBTQ community, and the acceptance of them in certain faiths and stuff like that. But then there are so many other things. Like I remember I went to a mass once, and the homily was about conception and being married, and the whole point of being married in the Catholic Church is so you can procreate and have children. That's why you get married, is to have children. And that was one thing for me. I was like sitting in the crowd, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, nope, like I totally disagree with this guy. But he went on to say that if you're a married couple and you can't have kids, but you really want kids, and so you have like in vitro fertilization, essentially what it boiled down to was like this kid was not made like in the traditional way that God had intended. So therefore they were not an abomination, but not really worthy of like the Holy Spirit. And that was like, I remember people looking around like, what is this guy talking about? And some were kind of like, he knows, he's the priest. I'm not a priest. I didn't do my studying. So, and I'm just like, how, no way. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. And like, nobody got up and left. Like, I can't even imagine, like, I have friends who tried so hard to have a baby, and things just weren't working for them. They are the most down-to-earth, loving people I may have ever encountered in my life. And they wanted a baby. They wanted to love a baby. They wanted to have a child. They wanted to have a family. And the only way that would work for them was through those in vitro fertilization. They had to do like the fertility shots and all this stuff. And now they have this amazing, beautiful little baby, and they're an incredible family. The fact that there's somebody out there in a church telling, like, if my friends had heard that message, I don't know what I would have done. So again, limiting. It's become exclusive, I think. People are feeling excluded, and that's why people are leaving.
With our current society, I'm a little bit unsurprised. Social media has been really good at pointing out some hypocrisies within the church, and like some of that stuff makes me mad too. Not just because it's happening, but because some people are trying to justify it. Sometimes you have to call them out and tell them that, hey, what you did was wrong. I like Rick and Morty, but I don't like the Rick and Morty fan base, which is the same way as like what people say with, I like your Christ, but not your Christians. I mean, is the fan base going to keep me from enjoying the show? Depends on how disruptive they are and how many people are shouting Pickle Rick and McDonald's. But anyway, I don't think that's right to leave God because of people. I actually know somebody who's agnostic that goes to my church. Like, even though he doesn't agree with every single thing that they say there, he gets some encouragement from it. It does help him kind of improve his life. And the treatment of homosexual people, it's unfair. I mean, what's the phrase for them? To convert them to being straight, that statistically, that has been shown to cause a lot of problems, and that is not the solution. The solution isn't to get rid of their orientation, it's to help them rise above it. They are created by God, and they are there. And it's the same can probably go for people who are non-binary. And I mean, there are still churches that reach out, and it's also a matter of like whether they err too much on the side of grace or not. It's a balancing act. The do-gooder in me wants to get people connected and get people to experience this joy I found in Christ and the community and the relief of not being held down by these, again, vices, of being able to rise above them. But at the same time, there's only so much that I can do, and the rest is kind of up to God with that.
They're looking for some proof or evidence of this magical being that floats up there in the clouds and does things. If these people that age start to think, they're going to look at eternity praising God. Eternity. That's longer than a year. It's longer than 100 years. It's eternity. And that's so ridiculous. I don't want to praise anybody for eternity. What am I thanking for? What am I going to do up there? Be with my 2 ex-wives? Well, that's going to be good for them, all right. They probably don't want to be with me. That's why they left. Actually, they left me because I can't have kids. I don't have any more to add to this.
All right.
I was raised a Lutheran. Then I found out the Lutheran church downtown here actually is against LGBTs. And I thought, good Lord. Sorry. I still use all these religious epitaphs. I know if I was gay or lesbian, well, I guess I wouldn't be lesbian, would I? Or bisexual or something. I imagine that would be a negative influence on me. To know that this supposedly being is supposed to care about me, but because I happen to have a desire to sleep with somebody other than the approved persons, he's going to reject me and send me to hell. Well, I wouldn't want to belong to that religion, which happens to be a lot of them, I guess.
I think the younger generations, what they're striving for is authenticity. And I think that sometimes in the American church specifically, they might view it as superficial, ungenuine, something they wouldn't want to be involved with. So I would say that that is something that the American church should hear and really take to heart. And honestly, I think we should, as believers, be praying about how we can correctly reflect the love of Jesus, reflect the love that's been given to us. I think it's disheartening, but I also think that as American Christians, we are deeply, deeply overly involved in our culture and what our culture says is right and wrong. We need to start taking the Bible and having that be our light. As someone who had a friend actually come out to me this last week, I think it's also something that the American church should be in prayer about and asking God for wisdom, because we can't figure out these things on our own accord. What I see in the church is homosexuality being a big red X and people saying, hey, if you're gay, you're going to go to hell. And I've seen that and I've heard that, and I just think that that's the wrong approach. When we're okay with gossip within the church and we're okay with other sin, but homosexuality is a big red X. And I think that needs to be talked about more in our church. I view homosexuality as a sin because that's how God says it. In the Bible, it's pretty clear. Just like I might struggle with pride. It's another sin, and it makes me fall short of God's glory. And I think that unites us in a way that is super cool, because we're all in need of the grace that's offered by Jesus. And I think that that's the approach that the church needs to take, especially in this 21st century, where this is becoming a larger topic.
I think a lot of that has to do, well, I was brought up in a home where they believed, young earth creationism, that there was a primal pair, Adam and Eve, and then just getting into the science of it and listening to what different specialists have to say in the field, both for and against that idea. I just didn't really see that notion to be able to hold any water. So I can definitely see why a lot of people would leave due to untenable ideas. I mean, I think a lot of people, if not most people, are kind of culturally Christian, or I guess that's how I would have labeled them, you know, when I was a Christian. And that just basically means that they don't take Christianity very seriously or very personally, and their day-to-day living isn't significantly impacted by it. Now, it would make sense why some of those people would change their mind just because they're not that invested in it, living in the age of information, or I guess just living with the internet, because we're no longer clustered in these smaller communities where I guess a big part of our personal identity is our tribal identity. Now we're actually able to speak with people from different tribes where a lot of our, I guess, fundamental ideas can be challenged, can be questioned. I think that is probably what the most significant reason as to why there is such a disparity between this generation and prior generations as to what their current belief system entails.
We live in a time where you're given kind of free rein to explore whatever you want, to structure your life infinite ways. And then if you follow the Bible, you say, this is the guide for how to have a family. This is how to be a single person. But what I've found is that I have a lot of freedom in knowing Jesus. It maybe doesn't look like freedom to a lot of people. Because I believe in God, I'm able to let go of thinking about, oh my goodness, like this is what I have to do so my life goes right. My life has purpose because I'm following God. It goes back to this idea that you're able to love people in a way that you could not if you're trying to do it by yourself. I think there's a want to fix the world. How do we solve the problem of starving children? How do we solve problems of pain? How could there be a God that lets this happen? We can see that we live in a broken world, and how we react to that is different depending on what we believe. I believe that we are more equipped when we believe in God to feel compassionately and not just need to shut down over how hard it is. If everyone just dies, then what are we trying to save the world from or for? I think it's difficult to figure out what it looks like to love people that don't believe the same things as you. And so churches are having a really hard time figuring out how to talk about people who are gay and lesbian, because in the Bible it talks about how that's not something that believers should approve of. Like, none of us wants to be told, oh, you're wrong, but hey, come join us. And it's a lot of those types of relationship or lack of relationship that really kind of drive people away from the church. Then sometimes you just kind of try not to talk about difficult things. You try to just sort of keep your opinions anonymous, keep your beliefs quiet when they're sort of unpopular, and that is really tricky because then the only people who are loud are the ones who are really abrasive and not kind. Then you start wondering, like, do I believe the same things as them? Am I also a terrible person? I think it's really easy for Christians and non-Christians to get focused on like one specific issue. So if you believe gay and lesbian people are not living according to what God says, that's one thing. But there's a whole lot more things that I believe that haven't become such a controversial issue. Christians believe a lot of things aren't right. There's always things that we can learn and that we never know the fullness of what he is or what he can tell us. That is what I believe shows us that God is real.